Good morning. How are you today? It's Friday. Yay! Welcome. My name's Linda and we're live today from beautiful Brisbane, Australia. And it's actually not quite as hot. Well, not quite as hot as it was yesterday in beautiful Brisbane, Australia. How are you today? How's your week been? Have you been doing some work around everything that we talk about, or have you picked something out, just one thing out, and has it begun to make an improvement in your life, in your day-to-day life? Remember to let me know how you're going and what you're discovering and what you're able to understand more. And if you have any questions as we go along, feel free to ask. Today I want to talk to you about essentials for boundaries, because one thing that we never learnt when we were children is boundaries. It wasn't there because every boundary, especially when we come through adverse childhood experiences, every boundary that should have been there wasn't there because the adults in our life, one, didn't model them, and two, broke every boundary. Okay? Good morning, Charlene. It's wonderful to have you here. So, just grab note, paper and pen, because remember, we need to write this information down because our memory isn't the best. As we go through recovery, our memory is one thing that we can work on, and it does get better. But if we make notes, grab your phone if you've got notes on your phone, or grab pen and paper, because it helps to write it down as our brain begins to process and order. Our prefrontal cortex needs this because it's the area of our brain that we haven't had a lot in our life with. Okay, so we want to put everything in an order now. As we do order, it begins to make a lot of sense because we get out of our limbic system and we connect more to working with our prefrontal cortex. Everything I do has an order, one, because I need it, and two, because we need it as a whole in order to make sense of things, okay? When we can make sense of things, obviously we make sense of things. When we make sense of things, we can get out of the limbic system, which is our emotions, and even though we have fragments in our amygdala, which is swollen, we can begin to put everything in a sequence. And when we do that, we can rely on that sequence again and again and again. And we're actually retraining our brain, okay? We're retraining our brain in a way that it's never been used before for us. So, let's grab our infographic today, okay? Now, values. Values are important in boundaries. And before we get into the boundaries, I want you to be aware too that boundaries are for us. They're not about how we keep people out. They're about learning internally what we need to know that we've never ever understood or never quantified. We've never been able to touch it and go, right, this is what it means for me. And if somebody or something outside of it doesn't align with me, then from there I'm going to make a decision what I want to do about it. So our values are what we love and assign importance to. So what do I value, and is it temporary or permanent? So for me, a value is, this is how I perceive what I want in my life. So this is what I value. And so something that is of the highest value to me is integrity. So integrity is when we can see somebody, what their morals are, and, you know, how honest they are. Do they align? So integrity for me is paramount, especially coming from a childhood where integrity wasn't prevalent at all. Okay? So when somebody is around me who doesn't value anything, doesn't value life, doesn't value other people, says one thing and does another, I can see that their integrity isn't there, doesn't line up. So I'm not going to let that person get very close to me at all. It's very unsafe to let people into our life whose values don't line up with us. And if you're like me and you're single, you're definitely going to sit back and first of all see what somebody's values are. So what their behaviour is like. So do their words and actions meet up? But I'm also going to look for, do they have the same values as me in relation to how they treat their children? So their values, for me, one of the things that I definitely look for is how they feel about their children and how they treat their children, and actually how do they value their children. And do they have the same attitude towards their children as me? So for me, I would do anything for my children. And I'm not saying I'd go around picking up their laundry, because let's face it, that's just never going to happen. But I would do anything to help my children have the best life that they can. And that also means that I will help them be able to observe areas of their life where they need help, or they may need to sit down and look at what can they improve. One of my sons, he has a brilliant mind for workplace health and safety. Sorry, my sinus has been playing up, so I just need a drink. Josh actually has a brilliant mind for workplace health and safety. Like, he can remember all of this stuff and has a passion for it. And whereas I think, my goodness, it's common sense. Why do we need to regulate it? But he loves it. And so I've been saying to him, look, you need to do something with this. And if you want to have a wife and kids, then you need a full-time job. And this pays well, etc., etc. But I don't say, oh, you must do this, you must do that. Anyhow, he came, we sit down and have mud-sun sessions where we just enjoy each other's company and chat away about what's happening in our lives. And he came to me and told me how he's put together what he's going to do with it in regards to with the business that he works with now. And I'm just like, wow. And when you do that sort of thing, especially with our kids when they're growing up, you open channels of communication, but we also let them know what our values are. And then and as adults, because Josh is 26, they can go away and think about how all the pieces of the puzzle can come together for them. So values are ultra important also in our relationship with our children, especially as they grow into adulthood. And we can't just assume that they understand values. We do have to have these conversations. Okay, limits. We can't set limits on others. We can only limit our exposure to them. The other side of limits is self-control without repression, i.e., the chocolate cake's there, but I've got to have self-control. What's my bigger picture? So we want to sit back, and we have to say to ourselves, what is my bigger picture? So for me at the moment, where my limits are is after a lot of trial and error, I found a keto way of eating. Now, it doesn't work for everybody, but it does work for me. But again, I have to look at food in this respect. What is my limit in order that I can attain a bigger picture? But with people, when we limit our exposure to people, we're going to ask the exact same question. What is the bigger picture for my life? And what are the decisions that I have to make around this person now? And for me, I've had to make a lot of decisions around toxic family and along the way toxic people. And those toxic people are people who don't have a bigger picture for their life. They'll do the same thing repeatedly, treat other people the same way repeatedly. And when you're old enough that you can see that it's happening again and again and again, I have to have a limit. I choose how much I will expose myself to that kind of person. I'm responsible to do that. As in step one, I have to have the self-control and say, no, it is emotionally and mentally unhealthy for me to continue to expose myself. And think of our neurology, okay? We get triggered being around people like this. So why would I want to keep repeating being triggered? And, oh, you're funny, Charlene. I have cake on occasion now. Because I spent years eating cake, I know what it tastes like, so saying no doesn't matter anymore. But we want to know what's our bigger picture for our life, and do I want to keep being around people that trigger me? Because essentially what that's saying is there's part of me that feels unsafe. And I have to ask myself the question, why do I want to keep being around people who make me feel unsafe? I've got to have a limit. Okay? This is a healthy thing for us to do. And as I explain to our clients, when we step out of somebody's life, there is always someone else that steps in. There is never a void in that person's life. There will be somebody else who steps in. Okay, talents. Confronting our fears and stepping out. It's actually taken me a while to get Josh to understand that, because my kids have mental health challenges as well. It's been passed down for decades in our family, but the one thing I've been determined to do is find real answers. Okay? So I've been saying to Josh that living in anxiety, the only way it's going away is to do things, is to challenge it. Yes, our brain's been wired for the fear throughout our childhood and certainly in our family. Unresolved trauma gets passed across through chemistry, body chemistry, one of which is cortisol. It gets passed across in the placenta. And scientifically, they have proven this. Now, this is not a guilt trip for mums at all. This is saying, right, we have this information. Now we as adults can say, right, I can be equipped and educated, and I can encourage my kids. I can tell my kids that this is what we know now. And I say to them, right, the way through it is to do. And Josh has started embracing this, and it's turning his life around, okay? And he will say to you exactly what I say to you. It's hard work getting the brain to change around because it's tiring. Neuroplasticity, where our brain forms new neural pathways, it's tiring work. It won't happen overnight, but it does definitely happen. I wouldn't be sitting here talking today if it didn't happen, okay? I couldn't talk. There was a time when I couldn't talk. So we have to go, okay, yes, my brain's been wired for fear since childhood, through the trauma, etc., etc. Because remember, our brain isn't fully formed when we're first born. I'm so sorry, my goodness. My sinuses are so dry today. So, when our when the primal part of our brain, which is where our brainstem is, we have to be willing to step out and do what we think we can't do, to value ourselves, okay, to put our talents into place and go, irrespective of my brain's immediate reaction of fear, I'm going to do this anyhow. Thank you. And Josh is definitely finding how much happier he feels confronting that his body and brain want to go offline. But no, he's going to do it. He wants life. He wants to feel alive. He wants to be happy. He wants to have the good things in life. And he's doing it. And me too. I mean, when I first started doing, I didn't do Facebook Lives initially like here. I did them in my group and I was terrified. I get up and speak at church and I was terrified to the point where, anxiety would pour down me. But I knew that unless I did these things, I would not be able to retrain my brain, which doesn't mean that you all, do Facebook Lives and, have to get up in public and speak. That's just the course for my life. But we do have talents that we need to get up and say, okay, despite the fear, I'm going to do it. We have to own our own thoughts. We need knowledge in order that we grow and expand our minds, and especially with complex PTSD. Not only do we need to understand it, we've got to use our thoughts and turn them around. We've got to feel what's happening for us because we've lived in our limbic system all our life, which is all the emotional centre. So we need now to teach ourselves how to use the prefrontal cortex and put order into things so that it makes sense. The knowledge of what happens in our brain will help us understand when it goes offline. So when we've been triggered. And then we can put steps into place to make that change, to teach our brain that we don't have to come from a place of fear. We can begin to use the word manageable. So now one of my key things, I learnt this recently, that people who have never experienced trauma, complex trauma, everything that comes up in their life, they look at it and they can think that's manageable. So now one of my challenges is to remember to teach my brain to think that's manageable. No matter what comes up, that's manageable. I just have to put into place, okay, I'm feeling emotional, I can recognise it, but I want to use my prefrontal cortex. It's manageable. I just have to find the order that will suit me. I hope that makes sense, Charlene. So the knowledge will grow and expand our minds, which is wonderful. It's a really healthy thing for us because in the space of boundaries, we begin to be able to let people know, well, no, that's not what's happening for me. This is what I need to do, okay? We want to clarify distorted thinking, okay? Now, when we've grown up with all of this just being our norm, we cannot understand that we do have distorted thinking, and it makes communication really challenging, especially in relationships where people aren't or haven't experienced trauma at a complex level, because we cannot make sense to them and they cannot make sense to us. And it makes for a really hard time in our relationships. So we want to sit down and we want to challenge our emotions. And this is the hard part, okay? We have to challenge what we've always believed is true, all right? And we have to be willing to do this in relationship with other people, okay? We've got to be willing to do that. Otherwise, it makes for really, really challenging times in our relationships. And even think about it at work. And how challenging is it at work when our thought process is one way and their thought process is another? And one of the things that is valued, even in our family, with all of us having mental health challenges, is that no matter what, we don't walk away until we've sorted out and we've asked a lot of questions of each other as to what's happening for each other so that we can work it out, all right? Desires. The desires of my heart spring from knowing who I am. With complex PTSD, one of the things that we do have to do is know who I am. And not just for in our relationships with the rest of the world, but when our triggers come, when we are triggered and our whole system goes offline, okay, so we don't have access to our thoughts, our emotions, our ability to understand what's going on, and our whole body, and I've been there and felt it, when it goes offline, and our whole body's got electricity going through it, and it's painful, and we're actually disconnected from who I am as well. We need to be able to know who I am so we don't get lost in the trigger, okay? Then we can affirm this is who I am. And in relation to boundaries, what it will do is we're then able to say, well, no, that's not who I am. So I'm not going to go down a path that somebody else is trying to lead me down. Okay? We make a very, very conscious choice that no, where they're going, because remember, we're looking at the bigger picture, where they're going is not where I want to be. That's not my bigger picture, and that's not who I am. That's not the type of person who I am either, okay? Now, can you see how important it is to look at the bigger picture of our life and not just focus on today? Yes, we have to focus on today and what we need to do, but ultimately why I'm focusing on today is because I have a bigger picture, and my bigger picture used to be just to be well, okay? So my bigger picture used to be I want to be able to walk without being worried that I'd fall over. I want to be able to talk and not be looking for words in my head all the time, okay? I want to be able to remember how to do the washing. They were my bigger goals. My health was my bigger goal. But as we get further into recovery, our bigger goal then becomes, okay, where am I going from here? What do I want to achieve with my life? What does my life look like when it's blooming? And one of the things for me is my work comes before what any other person in my immediate life is going to say. So I've always had relationships in the past that were codependent and put their needs first. So whoever comes into my life, I'm very clear that I will follow my internal compass as what I need to do with my work, okay? That's my bigger picture, because I know how important it is for other people to have the language, the education, to know that they're not alone. And it's more important than the needs of somebody in my life. So I know by going through my values, okay, that the person in my life has to be willing to accept and be on board with the same values. But they also have to be willing to accept that all the work that I've been through for the last 30 years has come to this place where it's important to follow what I'm called to do. Okay? Therefore, that person also needs to be secure within themselves. They don't need somebody the person in their life can't be there to be their cook, their cleaner, their chief bottle washer. If they're not secure within themselves, then I'm not the person for them, okay? It just won't work. And this is why we've got to do these boundaries. We've got to know our values, who I am, where I'm going, what I want for my life, for the bigger picture, and what drives me from within, okay? How do I know that this is where I stand and this is where I'm moving to? And if someone comes along and touches me on the edges, I know that they have to do their work. I can't do it for them. And the kindest thing I can do is just keep moving forward, okay? Love. Have we learnt to give and receive love? I want you to think about it. If there are people around you who love you, are you receiving that love and feeling good? Because it's really lovely when people love you. Or are you not able to feel that love? And it's taken me a very long time to be able to experience and feel that love, which means that we're receiving. From our childhood, we would always try and control the outside of us, okay? But all of this is internal work. Yeah, I understand the numbness. I really do. I've had to put so much work into not feeling numb anymore. And the other day, I'm pretty sure it was this week, we did 3 things that happen that, to our brain from this childhood adverse experiences. And one of them is that our self-sensory system goes offline, okay? It gets blunted, actually, is the word that the professionals use. It gets blunted, and therefore, part of feeling love is our senses, okay? So then part of coming off the bluntness is doing things that are sensory and reconnect. So if you want to look into attachment theory, it's so that we can reattach to our core self. So I learnt in the masterclass recently that even if we don't have a significant other, they've used pets to help people understand attachment, secure attachment, okay? Sorry, now I'll just have some coffee. So when you look at a secure attachment, we'll know our core self. We know who I am. And we're secure with who I am, okay? So we're not looking outside of ourselves to meet needs. We know that because we're adults now, we know that we can meet our needs, okay? We might not know how to meet those needs just yet, but we can affirm within ourselves that we can meet these needs. It comes back to knowing things are manageable, okay? And we have to be willing to work through getting off the numbness. But getting back to our pets, how they explain it is what you want to do, because it's our self-sensory system that's gone offline. We want to be able to touch the pet. And obviously you can do this with another person that you feel safe with, but you don't want to do it unless you feel safe with them and you've explained to them what you're doing. So in the context of a pet, we touch them and we become aware of how their fur feels, okay? So if I did this with Panda, her fur feels, so touch, all right, sensory system. I want to feel what that fur feels like. So for argument's sake, some dogs have rough fur. Actually, some cats do too. So you want to feel what it feels like coming through your hand. You actually want to develop a conscious awareness of what it feels like, okay? And then inside yourself, you want to connect that to who I am. So you want to go through the thought process. This feels really soft. What does soft feel like to me? Or what does hard feel like to me? What does it feel like inside here? So you're connecting into your brain, into the self-sensory system, but then you want to connect into your emotions of, what does this feel like for me? So for argument's sake, I really love Panda's soft fur, and if I do this, and I ask myself, what does that feel like to me? What's soft feel like for me? And you can look into their eyes, and I know with Panda, she looks up at me and like, oh, I love you. You're patting me, I love you. You can see the emotion in their eyes, and you can connect the emotion and how it feels for you. You connect the sense of touch and how touch feels for you. So soft fur for me feels really lovely, and looking at her, it's just like, oh, she's so cute, because she'll talk as well. She goes, yeah, yeah, you know, when you pat her. So if you're doing this with your pet and they've got hard fur, how does that feel for you? When you look in their eyes, what does it feel like for you? How am I connecting that in to what it feels like for me? Now, if you do this with a person, you're obviously not going to stroke them, okay? What you want to do is touch them, so grab their hands for a sense of touch, and you want to ask exactly the same questions. What does the sense of touch feel like, you know? So imagine you're going out with a farmer, or married to one, and their hands are rough from work. So what does that sense feel like? What does the roughness feel like? And then how do I connect it into me? How does that make me feel? All right? And what you're doing by doing things like, and look into their eyes and remember how much you love them. And then all of that comes together to feel love, to get our sensory system off the numbness, the bluntness, okay? And the other side of that too, then, you know, that's going back to the basics of knowing love, okay? And it's not our fault that we didn't know this stuff. It didn't happen for us, okay? But we can change it. We can change how this happens, right? And we go around giving love all the time. When we're connected to who I am, we give love, not because we want to control the environment outside of us, but because internally we feel it and we love the people around us so much that we just want to sit there and enjoy time with them. Okay, there's a lot to think about today or this morning, and I'm sorry we've gone for a fair while this morning. The book Boundaries by Cloud and Townsend is brilliant, okay? It doesn't talk about the neurological stuff, that's me, but it will explain boundaries more extensively, and it does help with relationships. One of my clients, they got the book after we talked about what was happening for them, and it really helped them understand what was happening with their teenagers. So grab the book, and it's worth it. The value is immense. They were only 2 chapters in, and it began to make a difference. We need to have the understanding of what all of this means, okay? Now remember, we're the tortoise. We do things slowly and we win the race, okay? I'll be back Monday for another edition. Till then, you have lots of notes to begin working on and understanding so much more for your life. I want to wish you a restful, relaxing weekend, and remember to schedule in time for yourself, especially if you're a mum, okay? Schedule in time for you, because what you're going to do then is teach the kids boundaries as well. Okay, blessings and dreams, and thanks for being here. Bye for now.